so far?
I mean, the biggest difference is how no one stops paying attention for any period of time. There's a focus on this race, being in the community, answering questions every single day. The judicial race pretty much took the summer off last year. From, the initial couple of weeks for the first forums at the legislative districts, it basically, nothing really happened until Labor Day. And then there was sort of a kick up. But for that, because it was a citywide race, a judicial race that a lot of people really just don't know about, it was much more low key. And whereas this is every single day, you are on all the time. And it's good because new issues come up, every single day. Every bit of news out of City Hall or from somewhere in the district becomes another issue for us. And whereas for Judge, it was literally about, hi, I'm qualified, he's not, and much different conversations. Because also running for judge, you are not allowed to talk about how you would find on any particular topic. And you also can't ask anybody for money personally. And so those two things are just vastly different in a council race.
That's interesting. And that leads me to a topic that we actually haven't wound up talking to a lot of people about the criminal justice system, but it's something that you have a lot of experience with. So what would that lead you to try to do if elected?
Well, so 10 years now as a public defender definitely gives me an interesting view into that system. One of the things that I've talked about is the fact that I think the municipal court system, I think there are some potential inefficiencies there, things that they could change, and I think with the help of city council, I think they could upgrade and we could find some money in their budget that we could then put towards social services like substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, because those are two huge areas where they really add to our homelessness issue, they're adding to a lot of the property crimes issues, and so, looking at ways to effectively utilize community service hours in Seattle and in our community, that's something that's never really been looked at the district courts and the municipal courts. But so from my experience of the last 10 years, there are a lot of things I think I could do where we could get more out of the court system. We could make it more efficient. We could pull some of the money out, use it for services that we don't have, but also just find some interesting ways, try to get back to some of the pre-diversion programs where, people, when they've gotten into trouble, give them a chance to get out by giving back to their community.
How do you explain to people, though, who tend to be the throw the book at everybody types, what the value is of those sort of programs?
The biggest thing is when you think about, between the booming homeless population and the rise in property crimes that are going on sort of across the city, is you can say that a lot of those people, if there was more money put into probation services, mental health treatment where people are getting properly medicated and properly diagnosed, and then substance abuse treatment where people are getting help, what I would say is you got to realize that people who have undiagnosed and improperly treated mental health problems, that leads them to doing things that can be quite antisocial. Same thing with substance abuse. I've had a lot of clients who are amazing people, but if you get them in a situation where they're hooked on meth or they're hooked on heroin, they're not behaving that way and they're ruining their lives, the lives of their family. But that's incredible. I watch them go into court, get the treatment, get better. And once again, they're a successful person in society doing positive things. And so what I would say is, just throwing the book at someone doesn't solve the problem. You want those people not to come back in court. And so for Seattle, for the council, the municipal court, they just deal with misdemeanors. So it's low-level criminals, it's not the felons, and we can do a tremendous amount to turn their lives around and to keep them from reoffending and to keep them off the streets and to hopefully get them back to a more productive life.
On the other side of it, on the enforcement side, are there any things that you have probably a little more insight into from the standpoint of, a defender, an advocate, etc., in terms of how you might deal with the police issues that have come up if elected?
Well, thanks for asking. So I think one of the biggest things is we as a society or as a community right now, we want more accountability out of the police. And I certainly see this in a lot of the reports that I read and the clients that I have, where things are happening between the police and the people that they're encountering on the street that shouldn't be happening. And so we want them to have more accountability. But I think on the flip side, in order to get the police on board with that, I think we should talk about things that the community could do to support them at the same time. One of the things I've talked to several police officers about and a couple of prosecutors is maybe we could propose some enhancements to sentences for people that either threaten or are physically violent towards the police. And so, as the new police contract is negotiated with the union, we could talk to them about the fact that we want body cams, we want more accountability, but that we'll give them something. Let's create some enhancements that basically say to the community, look, we need to treat them with the respect that we want them to treat us. You know, if we want to go back towards to protect and to serve when the police walked in our community and we're a friendly part of it, then, and we've really kind of gone to more punish and enforce, we have to get back by opening that two-way street. So I think one of the things that I offer is the number of police officers I've worked with, I know what they have to deal with. They have an incredibly tough job. And the truth is, there are far more good officers than there are out there that are bad officers. But it's just those handful of incidents that occur when it's bad, it just looks terrible. And so, amazingly enough, when I have a police officer on the stand and I'm cross-examining them, that's usually a hard part for me, because I actually started working for the prosecutor's office back in New York before I came out here, and I really believe in law and order, and I really do want to support the police. And so it's interesting, just because I'm a defense attorney, I don't think they look at me and say, oh, well, I'm not going to listen to you. I actually understand what they're going through, and so I think I offer the ability to talk about what things can happen to make it sort of make policing better for the community, and what things the community can do to be just more helpful to the police, to make their life a little bit easier and a little less dangerous.
So how did you wind up in this line of work, in the law and so forth?
Well, so it was actually kind of funny. I'd gone to law school, and I thought I was going to go into intellectual property law, do patent law, because my background is in physics and teaching physics. And while I was in law school, during my first year final exams while I was studying, I would finish late at night, and the only interesting program on was Law and Order. And so I really liked the show, and I ended up getting an internship with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I spent a whole summer working for a prosecutor in upstate New York. And so when I moved out to Seattle, originally I thought I would probably go in that direction. Oddly enough, I ended up taking an 8-year detour into the video game industry. But when I came back to the law, I actually volunteered with the public defender's office just so I could learn something useful. And I truly fell in love with it. It was the first job that I had that just totally spoke to me. I mean, helping people that were scared and they were in court for the first time. It was a pretrial diversion program for people with suspended licenses. And so that actually led to a full-time job as a public defender. And now it's been 10 years of doing that. And I like it. There's a lot of freedom. I like helping people. And I do about 90% of my practice is public defense. And then I do a few other things like a little immigration work, some family law, and some intellectual property law work.
That certainly requires you to get up to speed fast on things when people suddenly, here's a case you're appearing in court in 5 minutes.
Oh, yes. And actually, it's always funny. The first trial I ever had was my first day in court. And I showed up in court in Burien at the district court, and one of my coworkers said, "Hey, Phil, I've got 2 trials set for today. One of them's a DUI. Would you want to take it?" And I said, I don't know if I'm ready for that. He's like, "Oh, no, you're perfectly ready." He hands me the case file, and in 45 minutes, I read it, I interviewed the client, and it was funny. He had been charged with a DUI, but he had only blown a .04 on the breathalyzer, and he ended up being found not guilty, and it was the right verdict, and so kind of told me that, all right, I guess I am prepared to go as quickly as I need to go.
Yeah, well, in politics, the same thing. You have to be a really quick study. So
yes.
So speaking of that, yesterday a humongous thing came out at City Hall. The housing recommendations of the mayor.
Yes.
We're wondering, what are the top lines of what you heard, what you liked, what you didn't like? We know you probably haven't read the whole thing, but
right. Yeah, no, I haven't seen all of it yet. I know actually I've talked to several of the people who were on the Holic Commission about some of the recommendations that were coming. I have to admit, the whole plan for that within the urban hubs and within the urban villages to incentivize developers to say, look, let's go up an extra height above the current limit, but if you do that, you're going to have to provide affordable housing units. And if we do that at significant numbers across the whole city, I actually do agree with them that that's one of the ways we're going to be able to put stock of affordable housing into this city at a fast enough rate. Because when you look at really how much it costs to build affordable housing and how much effort it takes just to get 30 or 40 units built, if we're talking 20 to 50,000 affordable units, we've got to have a much broader plan of attack. And I do think that inclusionary zoning and the upzoning is a great way to do it. On the flip side, I think some of the ideas with the single family areas going multifamily, I worry about it. I worry about it a little bit from the standpoint of, disrupting the flavor of the neighborhoods. And, a lot of people buy a single family home to be in that kind of neighborhood. And if you end up with duplexes and triplexes and small cottages all around you, it does change the flavor of your neighborhood, and sort of it can affect why you move there. I think the areas they're looking at in District 1, from my first glance, it seems like a decent idea. I do, like I said, though, I do worry about how people feel about that kind of upzoning in the single-family areas. And the other question is, what's the impact going to be on our traffic and our parking? I mean, we already clearly have issues here in District 1. And, with the fact that we've got another almost 2,000 units that are about to be filled and built, that's going to be a tremendous impact. And I know now, when I try to get downtown early in the morning and I'm sitting in wall-to-wall traffic at Trader Joe's just to get across the West Seattle Bridge, it makes me worry about that. But luckily for now, some of these are also just recommendations, and they have to go through the process to actually become what the plan is. But I think we actually have some ideas on the table that are going to address the affordable housing issue. And I think as long as we're careful about not doing too much in terms of just allowing more multifamily building all over the place, I think we can actually make this work.
So in doorbelling events, wherever you've been meeting people lately, what have you been hearing from them? I
mean, the one thing that never stops is it really is about the traffic, it's about transit in and out of West Seattle, the West Seattle Bridge, being able to park in our different parts of town. The rise in property crimes through District 1 has definitely been an issue for people. Down in South Park, there are definitely different issues, kind of like up with Delridge, with the idea you don't have a real grocery store in either place. Down in South Park, you don't have a bank. There's also issues down there with, cleaning up the place and keeping it up. But they also have a real issue with policing as well. I know, the couple of times I've been down there doorbelling, I'll be there for 4 or 5 hours and not see a single police officer drive by. I know when I met with Jeff Hayes and a few other people and Raina Anderson down at Napoli's, we sat there for 2.5 hours and not a single police car drove by their corner. So I know that, that's an issue for them. Interestingly, when it starts coming up, the tunnel is not an issue people start with, but everybody is very sort of considered, or sort of, they consider what's going to happen if this doesn't get going again. What's our date? How are we going to get downtown? Isn't the viaduct unsafe, and hasn't it been unsafe for 3 years? So it's kind of interesting how nobody really leads with that, but a lot of the conversations get to that point. And so, and that's good, because I certainly have real questions about what's our backup plan, about the fact that the Seattle taxpayers are on the hook if damage is done that's ancillary to building the tunnel, which I don't think is reasonable and fair. So that's kind of in the back of a lot of people's minds as well.
So, but when you talk to them, do they think we should go back to the drawing board or just keep going?
That's interesting. I think most people are kind of undecided. There is definitely a sentiment that leans towards, let's just stop it right now and come up with something else. But as I talk to them, I kind of say we got to worry about not being too reactionary about that. That we've spent a tremendous amount of money. We've gone this far. We need to at least find out if there's a date that they think the berth is going to be up and running again, and therefore when we could get it done by. But if we go too many more months, like if we actually pass the first of the year and we're in January, still in this same spot where we don't have a time for it to be up and running, we don't have a completion date, then I think it's going to be the job of the new council to talk about, all right, well, what do we do as a city to deal with this issue? And so I think people are kind of, at this point, they're just sort of waiting. okay, what's going to happen next? I know a lot of people feel that they kind of got gypped a little bit, that the votes had not been, for a deep port tunnel, especially in West Seattle. I don't think that was a popular plan. They kind of feel like it got, sort of slid under the rug for us. So it's a very divisive issue. I know a lot of people want it solved, but the problem is there isn't any perfect solution to it right now. So I think everybody was okay with the idea. Well, all right, well, let's see what happens.
On the transportation subject, we've been asking everybody, will you vote for or against the transportation levy?
That's a great question, because it's been interesting. Since February, I've been going through the whole Candidate 101, learning about a lot of issues. I've been to several of the meetings where Scott Kubley's been at from SDOT. I know within all of the candidates in District 1, there are definitely different feelings. My gut is that I'd be most worried about not passing it, that I don't necessarily know if SDOT is capable right now of handling not getting those funds. But I think I am actually now leaning towards voting against it. That a lot of the people talking about voting against it and forcing them to come up with a better plan, thinking about different ways of paying for it. And also, my big issue is that I don't think what SDOT doesn't have on the table right now is fixing their inefficiencies as part of asking for almost $1 billion from the taxpayers. So if we didn't pass it, then all of a sudden they're in a position where they're going to have to scramble to make their ends meet for the next year until something new can be done. We can find some new funding mechanism. So as of right now, I am actually leaning towards voting against it, but I have not made a final decision yet.
Do you see any particular inefficiencies that you would like to see them fixed?
Well, so personally, obviously, all of the information I have is sort of anecdotal and third person. Things that I've heard is that there are places within SDOT where they probably have some redundancies that, they could save some money either in salaries or in job responsibilities, that some of the bus routes around this city are not as well designed as they could be. I know I asked Scott Kubley specifically, you're asking for $930 million from us. What is SDOT looking to do as far as curing its inefficiencies? The one answer he said was that when SDOT goes into, let's say, tear up a street to do something, they'll work with public utilities and City Light to make sure everybody goes in at the same time so that it's not opened up more than once. And that's actually a really good thing. So I take that as they're thinking about some of their inefficiencies. But so I asked him, anything else? And there was no answer. And I don't think that's enough. I think that if we've got that kind of a shortfall, that we need $930 million from the general public, that they could do more to find answers for some of that money within their own budget. But I don't specifically know what they would do. I just know that it's time for someone to take a look.
Speaking of SDOT, tomorrow we'll find out their proposal for 35th Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any particular leanings toward what you think that they should do?
Well, I definitely think we need to look at the modes of transportation that we're using as a community most often, which is obviously bus and car. It was funny, the other day I was heading into Fremont and I was stopped at the light on Dexter going across the Fremont Bridge. And in the span of just over one light, 46 cyclists passed me going up Dexter. And I thought to myself, this is an area where people are effectively using cycling as a mode of transportation. It was early in the mornings, they were heading to their jobs. Frequently, when I'm coming down Fauntleroy or 35th, I won't see a cyclist. I just won't. And so I'm concerned that we put in District 1 getting downtown a little too much focus on cycling. And I know like some of the feeders to 35th, like they're talking about on Morgan, taking away half a street of parking, putting up a concrete barrier for a separated bike lane to feed into it. And, that worries me, that that's not necessarily the right way to spend money and that it's not considering how people in District 1 really are getting around. So that's one of my biggest concerns, is to make sure that the focus of what they're doing is on speeding up the path for the buses and also doing anything to lessen or speed things up for the cars along the way. Not actually in speed limit wise, but just sort of efficiency.
Right, got that. So we've noticed in recent months we've seen you at a lot of community events, not just campaigning, but participating. It's something that not everybody does. So tell me a little bit about your personal philosophy about community involvement.
You know, I love being part of this community, and I love helping out. And I know, like 8 years ago when I started doing my trivia night at Talarico's, I met a lot of people. And, you know, because of that, I ended up doing some fundraisers there, and I ended up doing some other events as a host and doing trivia nights at other places to raise money. And just from that, I started realizing that I'd like to just do more and be involved. I've been part of Rotary, which my mom got me involved in years and years ago. And I love how people in Rotary give their time to the community and they donate money for their community to make things better. And so I think kind of those lessons made me feel that I want to be an active part of this community, you know, promoting it as much as I can and just making things more fun. Like at the 4th of July festivities down at the end of California, it was really neat, you know, when they had some of the candidates that were there, we had a chance to announce the sack races and the three-legged race, and that was fun. Like, I like having fun. I like getting people excited and involved, and I just like kind of being out there and amongst the people, because I think the most fun part of this running for District 1 and running for City Council has been meeting more people. And I've, created some amazing friendships over the last few months. And so I kind of find the same thing when I get out and do things in the community, that I just enjoy it.
Is there any particular issue, it might be what we've already talked about or not, that you don't think is getting talked about enough in this race overall?
So that's actually really interesting, because, there are so many issues that obviously don't get talked about, because you get the ones at the forefront, like affordable housing and traffic and transit and transportation and the police. Interestingly, a couple of times people have asked me, like, what are the things that concern you most, on a global scale or a national level? And I have to sort of say, like, well, it's not part of my race, but I know for me, like, water conservation and where we're headed with that is actually something that I think is more important than people are letting on. And that's actually something that's going to be a real part of what I would do at City Council, because as a country and as a planet, we're really headed for some bad times with respect to water shortages that I think if we start planning for them now, will actually make a difference when there could be some horrible problems later on. And along with that, it's just sort of the environment in general, like, lowering our carbon footprint, being as sustainable and green as possible. Those are things that I hope whoever gets on the council works really hard to make sure that Seattle is kind of on the forefront of all those things. They aren't issues that are going to get you elected. They're not the things that people are worried about on a day-to-day basis, like the potholes on their street or police coverage, but they're incredibly important, and they're incredibly important to me.
Have you had the opportunity during the campaign to talk to any of the sitting members of the council?
A little bit, not too much. They're incredibly busy, and the truth is I'm kind of one of the outsiders in the race, so I don't really, it's a little harder for me to get their ear and talk to them, because they really had never met me before this year. So a couple have been nice and given me some time to talk, but it's hard. It's hard to get a chance to talk to them that much.
Looking at the work that they've done on many things in recent months, is there anything that you think has gone particularly well, that, work that you would want to further or support?
Let's see. Well, I do like, what Mayor Murray did with this, with, cleaning up that 9.5 block area of central downtown. I think that was a nice move. That was things heading in the right direction. I know the Stranger specifically asked all of us candidates what grade we would give Ed Murray on what he's been doing, and I thought that there was some better direction that I've seen from them that some of the other candidates did. Other than that, let's see, that specifically stands out. Nothing. What I will say is it really does look like the council is trying very hard to make positive moves all over the place. Like, I don't feel like they're sitting back on their laurels and just letting things happen. I think we have to wait and see. One of my big issues is it feels a lot of the time that when the council passes legislation or makes a decision, that there's all this excitement and celebration and they move on. But the fact is, you've got to see that through to the end. And that is a big part of my campaign, that I think I worry about the follow-through, I worry about the management. So on the front end, with things being started and talked about, I think there's great conversations right now. And I do think, watching all of the other council members campaign right now, I think everybody is really trying to move in the same direction to fix all of the issues with the city. But I want to see the follow through. I want to see them keeping people in front of them at council meetings, keeping people accountable, making sure that the projects do what they say they're going to do in the beginning. So right now it's kind of, I'm in that sit and wait. Okay, some of these ideas seem good. We're talking about affordable housing. We're talking about, workers in this city. Are we going to make the difference that they say we're going to make? So.
Yeah, good point. Do you have anything else, Kim?
We're good.
Okay, well, the last question that I've been asking is,
yes.
Okay, so somebody walks up to you and they look at you and they say, well, I'm voting for, and they name one of the other 8 people.
Uh-huh.
What do you tell them is the reason why they might really want to consider voting for you instead?
So what I would say to them is that we have got an amazing opportunity right now, for the first time in 100 years, to have a districted election, which means we have a representative who is new from West Seattle that's talking about West Seattle, that is not beholden to any politician, to any group, to anything currently in the mix downtown. And what I would say is, I've been a business owner, I'm a trial lawyer, I've been a physics teacher. You want to take someone who has enough skill and experience to handle every issue that's out there, not just the couple that are right in the forefront right now, but the issues that are coming down the road that we haven't seen yet. And you want to pick someone who isn't going to vote with someone else because they owe getting that job to someone else. And so that's what I would say to them, that this is your chance to pick a new representative, a voice for this community that is only speaking for this community. And that's exactly what I am. I'm something new. I've got a great set of skills and a good resume to tackle all sorts of different areas. And I am only going to represent this community because this is who I want to represent, the people of District 1.